If you're applying for disability benefits or help people that are, the path to success has never been more complicated. Welcome to the Disability Expert Podcast, where we tackle the difficult issues and interview the country's top experts to help you better navigate the disability process. Winning a disability case is hard and keeps getting tougher every day. We can't promise you'll win your case by listening, but we sure think it's going to help.
This really isn't that complicated. I mean, you want to win your case, don't you? Well, then listen to what I say. Hi, this is Chad Brown. Welcome to the Disability Expert Podcast. So glad you're with us today watching. I am super excited today to have Ashley Sappenfield as my guest, probably one of, if not the best young disability lawyers in the country. I say that in all honesty. She's just a phenomenal lawyer. Going to be great to have her on the show and talk about it today. Ashley, thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you, Chad, for having me.
Yeah. So let me tell you a little bit about Ashley, what brings her to that designation as one of the best disability lawyers in the country. She is the disability group department leader for Lanier Law Group, which is in Greensboro, but works statewide in North Carolina. She is a North Carolina board certified Social Security disability law specialist. She is the current chair of the disability advocacy section of the NCAJ, which is the equivalent of North Carolina trial lawyers. She is currently a board member for NOSCR, the National Organization for Social Security Claimants Representative. She is the immediate past co-chair of the NOSCR Next Gen. She is the rising vice chair of the North Carolina Bar Association Military and Veterans Law Section. She is also extended faculty at Elon University, where she leads the Social Security Disability Seminar. She works in one of the top 500 disability law firms in the country. She was voted the Rising Star by NOSCR in 2023. She has spoken more times than I care to elaborate, and that is why she is here, because she is an expert of experts. You are super qualified.
Oh, well, thank you.
I'm just thankful you took time and all the stuff you're doing to come and talk with me on my podcast, because, Chris, I guess they say if you want something done, someone who's super busy, they'll get it done for you. So obviously deeply, deeply vested in the disability community, working for disability rights and how'd you get into disability law? How'd you get into the work you're in now?
Yeah. So, the first time I can recall learning about disability law was actually at my church's overflow homeless shelter. We would take in people that weren't able to stay overnight, essentially at the local homeless shelter. So there'd be about 20 people or so that would have to go to the overflow shelter at our church. And unfortunately, disability does disproportionately impact homeless people. Many homeless people are in those positions because they're unable to do jobs or unable to consistently do work. So I started talking to a couple of people as a part of that shelter, serving them food and things and just chatting them up, and learned about disability that way. A lot of people having some difficulty with the application process, which is so difficult for many. Really had an interest in it from there, but didn't actually start practicing disability law until about 3 or 4 years later, when Miss Lanier called me up to take over her disability practice. So that's where it started, and still do certainly a lot of work with the homeless shelters as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I know for years when my office is in Mooresville now, but our office used to be in Statesville, we worked with the homeless shelter there. And it's just a unique set of issues that really, I think you're right, though, in that, how do people become interested in serving the disabled? You get access to almost all the different types of cases at the homeless shelter. You have people who have severe mental health problems that can't work. You have people who lost their jobs, who literally just became homeless because of their financial situation. And I think that makes perfect. Knowing what I know about how the disability community interacts with the homeless community, man, that makes perfect sense. So I see how you got here. Yeah. You and I both know a lot of people start in this space and they don't stay.
Right.
They don't stay doing disability work. It's not glamorous. It's not always treated kindly by others in the legal profession in terms of, why are you still here? And I'm not just here, but, leading the charge for young lawyers in the disability section.
Certainly, everything that you said is true. There is some scrutiny on this type of law, and particularly, it does get challenging because you have so many factors that are working against you. Vocational expert testimony, for example, that is essentially based on facts that are hard to corroborate, for lack of better words. One of the reasons that I stayed in disability law is there is really nothing quite like the high of getting someone approved after such a long and arduous fight. I've gotten approvals for people that have been fighting against the administration for over 10 years. I've gotten people approved that were previously living in tents that are able to finally get into apartments for the first time in 8 years. There is nothing quite like knowing that you have changed someone's life for the absolute better. And knowing that you have the skills and knowledge to put those people in those places, why would you stop?
Yeah, it's funny. I think there has to be a desire there, though, to meet people in the suffering. Like if you're sort of, I don't really want to deal with people who, may be struggling, having a hard time, having emotional difficulties. Like it's overwhelming. And I don't fault people for that. I don't fault attorneys for that who say, hey, this is not for me, because you don't really need to be in the space. The people in this space need to be people who are committed to making a difference in people's lives, who are often at their lowest point.
Absolutely.
Really sometimes feel like they don't have any hope. So let me pivot here, because I want to talk about this thing you did recently, which was become a North Carolina board certified disability specialist. I took that exam way back in 2010. I'd had no desire to take that exam again. There is no way I would let that lapse. It was so difficult. Even though I want to spend a little time today talking about some practical things that you can bring to the table to help claimants, I do want to spend a little time talking, because it's a huge honor. There's not a lot of people that have passed the exam. Can you talk a little bit about what that process was like, what it takes to be an expert, sort of what it means to you in terms of why are you willing to go down that road, in your practice at this point, when obviously there's a lot of other stuff going on?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something that's for everyone, and you do have to meet certain qualifications. You have to have been, doing this type of work for an extended period of time. You do have to spend a majority of your practice around disability work. And then a committee makes a determination on if you have just the experience to take the exam. But then actually studying for it is a great way to reacquaint yourself with things that you should already be practicing or doing in hearings or in your own briefs and motions before the court. So the process, just in terms of studying, was really sitting down and taking a careful look into how the legal arguments that I already argue at the hearing stage are applied through the law. Social Security has, several regulations that they've posted, several cases that are on point, that are still relevant. And I think actually taking the time, the dedicated time to sit down and read through those things, even if you decide not to take the exam, which some people do, or even if you don't pass it the first time, I absolutely think taking the time to really look through the rules and regulations and acquaint yourself, it makes you a better advocate.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Aaron, who works for me, I think is eligible next year maybe to sit for the exam. And he and I were talking about it. I know you're friends with Aaron. Just helping him understand that a lot of times we get caught up in sort of the day-to-day practice of law, which is, I just need to win my case. I need to understand these facts. I need to understand that. And then you sort of get a little bit stagnant in your growth. And when studying for that specialty exam requires you to go back and look at not necessarily exactly what the law says, but a lot of times, why is the law there? Like, why do these rules actually exist? Because just like we're sort of running the mill, going through our cases day to day, so are the judges. And I think for me, being able to take that deeper dive and understand, what's really going on here. Like, an expert is someone not just who understands the rules, but who understands why the rules are there, why they exist, how they can be applied in cross situations where maybe you don't think about the direct application, but maybe there's an additional application. And just bringing that level of expertise to the table, that knowledge, I think, puts you in a position to really, win the challenging cases, differentiate yourself with the judges, which obviously you've done. And, I just think that's a process where if you engage in it, it's difficult. And yes, it's just a piece of paper on your wall, but it really is more than that. It's about being able to practice at a different level and bring a different level of competence, which is obviously in our client's best interest.
Right. And it's really such an affirmation for yourself too, something that I think affects a lot of our practice group, just like, others, attorneys in general, is you get this sense of imposter syndrome and start wondering if you're good enough. That piece of paper affirms that you are good enough and that you do have the expertise to be doing the type of law that you're doing. So certainly do it for yourself.
Let's talk a little bit. Okay. So you are an expert. I don't, no question. You bring a super high level of expertise to the table when you work with your clients. One of the things that I know is you've dealt with some recently, and I wanted to bring up was this idea of hearing conduct. So one of the things that I've always struggled with at hearings, and I think clients struggle with, is you sort of have two ends of the spectrum. You have some clients who come in who seem to maybe exaggerate a little bit.
Right.
And on the other side, you have people who they're just so nervous and introverted that they don't accurately portray the level of difficulty that they're having. So I know you deal with that. I know you deal with both ends of that. Can you just sort of walk through, like, how do you work with your clients to make sure that they're accurately portraying the impact of their disability to judges? And what advice would you give to clients who are preparing for hearings that they're, maybe going to deal with this issue, even if they haven't thought about it?
Right, absolutely. One of the hallmarks of disability inclusion and particularly disability studies is this kind of presumption that disabled people have to perform their sick role, right? Yeah. They feel forced into a position where maybe if you have an invisible disability, or maybe you have a disability that has flares or is recurrent or remittent, I do think that many claimants feel almost obligated to try and show that they look disabled, right? Yes. Because of just, presumptions on what a disabled person is or should look like. And that's very tough, right? How I see that manifesting the most often is particularly for people that have gait impairments or orthotic issues, orthopedic issues. They end up bringing a prop to the hearing, like a walking cane, a walking stick, something that's not explicitly mentioned in the records, right? And one of our challenges with a judge is building credibility. And when you have props or devices or things of that nature that the client feels they need to have to perform their disability, it loses credibility with the judge, because they're going to assume then that if there is no prescription for that walking device, can they credibly take the testimony of the client as true for other matters that are discussed in the hearing? So that's a very difficult place to be in. What I like to try and tell my clients is to be as authentic as possible. I do try in a pre-hearing conference to discuss those types of things. And I do think that, ultimately it goes to the comfort level of the client. If the client is more comfortable with, bringing those props or devices, there's nothing that I can say ultimately that's going to prevent that from happening. But I do try to encourage clients to be authentic and to realize that it's not just their testimony that the judge has in front of them. The judge is also going to be looking at their objective medical evidence and looking for if that device has been mentioned at any other point. And that can be true for all sorts of things, emotional support animals, air filters, things of that nature. On the opposite side of the spectrum, with people that are very anxious or maybe have egregious mental health issues that are manifesting, hearings aren't easy to go to, even for people that are, experienced and have gone several times before. Something that I try to practice for myself is being a non-anxious presence for the client. If I'm able to calm and center myself, a client is going to feed off of your energy. So the more calm and concise and clear you are, the more calm and concise and clear your client is likely to be. So, there have been instances where I'm perfectly fine holding my client's hand. I like to talk about calming things like my pets or my kids. And I do think that while that might not stave off entirely the feelings that my clients are having during the hearing, I feel like if we can build a rapport and they can focus on me during their testimony, that really aids in them being able to give good testimony.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's probably hearing anxiety that manifests itself both ways. Some people shut down. They're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. They're scared to death. The judge is going to think they're exaggerating. And on the other side, you have people who are scared to death that they're not going to fully appreciate what's wrong with them, maybe because they can't see it. And I think that's a tough issue. I think how you handle it's, exactly what you should be doing. Which leads me to a different question, though, which is, pre-COVID, we all did in-person hearings.
Yeah.
Post-COVID, now we do phone hearings, video hearings, sometimes in-person hearings. What are your thoughts on hearing modality and how obviously being able to see the client is in some levels, I think, advantageous for the judge appreciating what's wrong with them. But Obviously, that's not the world we live in. So how are you working with your clients to make these decisions about, should it be a phone hearing? Is a video hearing okay? No, we really need an in-person hearing, even if it means we're going to wait 2 or 3 months. We need to get that in-person hearing to get the proper appreciation of what's going on. So how are you walking your clients through that? Because I know it's a pressing issue that we're dealing with.
Right. Absolutely. So the best thing we can do there is give, the clients our advice, but I ultimately do leave it to the discretion of the client, and there are some people that do insist on in-person hearings. And even if I don't think that that's necessarily absolutely required, that's what the client wants, then certainly I'd like to defer to them. To some degree, I do think that in-person hearings can be cumbersome for some of our clients because, as we previously discussed, for clients that are homeless or transient or don't have resources, getting a ride to the hearing office or even having a phone to set an alarm to make sure that they get there on time can be extremely cumbersome. And so, we'd like to try and head those things off at the front and make sure that we have things in place, particularly pre-COVID, to get the clients to the hearing. But even then, for clients that have really egregiously bad physical issues, not all of the hearing offices are easy to access. Some of them still have stairs. There's still even quite a bit of walking within the building. So sometimes if I think it's going to be cumbersome from a financial standpoint or from a physical standpoint for the client to physically come in, I do say, hey, video hearings are an option. The judge is still going to be able to see you, but it's going to reduce that cumbersomeness that you can get from having to go in person. As far as telephone hearings are concerned, I do think that in some ways you always want to try and think about the most advantageous ways to show the judge the manifestations of some symptoms of clients, right? Sure. I do find that telephone hearings may add to mental health symptomology that clients have, right? And by that, I mean, if you have a client, for example, that has really severe ADHD or OCD, you're going to hear pressured speech, you're going to hear that distraction a lot more on the phone than you might see in person or by video. So there is some strategy to it. I do think that all three are acceptable modalities, and I certainly hope they continue in light of some of the directives that we've been getting from the top, right? Ultimately, it's what your client is comfortable with, and I certainly defer to them.
What a good point about the phone hearings, though, because I think people just assume, even lawyers who do this, they assume in-person's better, and then video's next, and then phone is sort of a bad alternative, and I know in COVID, we have federal appellate division. Like I feel like we did some federal appeals just because we had phone hearings, because when we did video hearings or the in-person hearings on the remands, it seemed like, well, I don't know how I ever denied this case. It's like, because you didn't see them. Like that's what you needed to see. You needed to see the manifestation of their disabilities. But at the same time, I think that's a very nuanced understanding of pimping modality is probably not, yes, it's the client's ultimate decision. But, at a really high level, you're looking at a lot of different factors about why a phone hearing might be better than a video, or a video might be better than in person, or
very true.
So I think that's good insight. We are short on time, but there's one thing I want to talk about real quick. You are now a adjunct or distant faculty for Elon Law, right?
Yes.
And you're teaching the Social Security seminar currently, is that right?
That's right, for the winter trimester.
What's going on with that? I know from where we served in leadership a few years ago, this has been sort of an ongoing project that you sort of finalized and worked through. And
Chad, this was a dream of yours that you just brought about just in conversation, when we were on leadership together. And, I just got to thinking after we had that conversation that Elon is so well suited for doing disability hearings because the law school is within blocks of where the Greensboro hearings are. And then on top of that, the good folks over at Legal Aid are also very close in proximity to the law school and to the hearing office. And that's where we're getting our cases from is through a volunteer pro bono arc with Legal Aid. The clinic is set up to be threefold. So we spend a lot of time about disability inclusion and particularly disability studies and understanding the framework of how people that are living with disabilities really have a lot of unique challenges working against them from the medical legal field. And then just kind of understanding that it's not our job to champion people with disabilities. It's not our job to be the white knight coming in to save the day. It's really to help people navigate a system that is inherently stacked against them. So we do a lot of disability inclusion work. And then I teach about what Social Security law is and how it's applied to these cases. And then we are doing clinic work where we're studying medical records. We're looking at how the law can be applied to get that person disability. And then through our inclusion work, looking at why the medical records may say what they do, or what that person's experience has been like trying to navigate the Social Security application process. So I'd like to say that it's going well. My students are very passionate. It's been an absolute honor to teach them, and I hope it continues.
I just think that's awesome, because there's a lot of, and I'm probably guilty of it. I'm getting older. There's a lot of flack about younger people. But one of the things that comes out of all the studies is that this younger generation of people under 30s want to have impactful lives. They want to have meaningful lives. They're not necessarily chasing money or status or glory. And sometimes that's they're viewed as being lazy. But the reality is that they want to have meaningful impact in their communities and in their lives. And you and I both know this is a way to do that. Like there's
absolutely,
and you get caught up in law school, and sometimes law school is about journals and big firms, and there's a place for all those things, right? But
absolutely,
if you're in a mindset of I want to make an impact on someone's life, you and I both know this is that's what you want. Like you'll get it's a tough road, but you'll get what you want there. And for you opening that up to them so they can see it, just kudos to you. Just so proud of you.
Thank you.
Just great.
Well, thank you for planting the seed, Chad.
Yeah, well, very good. Very good. Well, just thankful for you coming on the show. And that'll wrap it up. This Disability Expert Podcast. We thank everyone for watching. Subscribe, tune in, episodes where we're going to bring on the country's best experts to work through these issues and help people figure out how to navigate this difficult system. Thanks a lot.